Live picture now from Columbia, South Carolina. I want to listen right in to Governor Mark Sanford speaking about that trip he took without telling anybody. Staff told people and reporters that he was hiking in the Appalachian Mountains, and the Appalachian Trail. Turns out he was actually in Argentina. Okay. Let's listen in.
Y'all ready? Everybody ready? I won't begin at any particular spot. Let me just start with I don't see her. Where's Gina Smith?
Not here.
Not here? Okay. I had a conversation with Gina Smith this morning when I arrived in Atlanta, and I told her about my love of the Appalachian Trail. I used to organize hiking trips. Actually, when I was in high school, I would get a soccer coach or a football coach to act as chaperone, and then I'd get folks to pay me $60 each or whatever it was to take the trip, and then off we'd go and have these great adventures on the Appalachian Trail. And I told her of adventure trips, both in college. I was a campus representative for Eastern Airlines and could fly free, which meant I'd fly different places around the world, get myself a job, carry $100 emergency money, and either find a job there with the locals and come back, or come on home. Told about my years in Congress and early years in the governorship of different adventure trips of leaving and traveling different places, because what I have found in this job is that one desperately needs a break from the bubble, wherein every word, every moment is recorded, just to completely break. And I've found that to be true in trips to the farm or in trips other places further afield. And all of those things were true. I talked about the profound frustrations that I felt over this last legislative session in the battle that was in place with regard to the stimulus package, the $700 million in play, and how at an emotional level I found it exhausting. I tried to make as good a stand as I could, not for a further political office. And what was interesting, it was always viewed, if you're doing this to climb some further political office, it was always based on that idea that I genuinely believed that that action would be bad for the taxpayers, and made the stand as I did. So all those things we talked about this morning were true, but they're not the whole story. And that's obviously why everybody's gathered here right now. And so let me lay out that larger story that has attracted so many of you all here. I'm a bottom line kind of guy. I'll lay it out. It's going to hurt, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. In so doing, let me first of all apologize to my wife Jenny and our four great boys, Marshall, Landon, Bolton, and Blake, for letting them down. One of the primary roles well before being a governor is being a father to those four boys who are absolute jewels and blessings that I've let down in a profound way. And I apologize to them. And I don't like apologizing in this realm, but given the immediacy of y'all's wanting to visit and my proximity to them, this is the first step in what will be a very long process on that front. I would secondly say to Jenny, anybody who has observed her over the last 20 years of my life knows how closely she has stood by my side in campaign after campaign after campaign, and literally being my campaign manager, and in the raising of those four boys, and in a whole host of other things throughout the lives that we built together. I would also apologize to my staff, because as much as I did talk about going the Appalachian Trail, and that was one of the original scenarios that I'd thrown out to Mary Neal, that didn't want where I ended up. And so I let them down by creating a fiction with regard to where I was going, which means that I then, in turn, given as much as they relied on that information, let down people that I represent across this state. And so I want to apologize to my staff, and I want to apologize to anybody who lives in South Carolina for the way that I let them down on that front. I want to apologize to good friends. Tom Davis came over the house. He drove up from Buford. And he has been an incredibly dear friend for a very long time. In my first race for governor, he moved up, and he lived in the basement of our house for 6 months, and we called it Jurassic Park because it was the kids' dinosaur sheets, and all kinds of different folks were living there in the campaign. And he gave of his time and his talent and his effort for ideas that he believed in to try and make a difference in those ideas. And so I, in a very profound way, have let down the Tom Davises of the world. On the ride over here, I called the house, and in the background I could hear my parents-in-laws who'd come up to be with Jenny, and I've let them down. I had the most, surreal of conversations a number of weeks ago with my father-in-law, laying some cards on the table, and he was incredibly gentlemanly, as you cannot imagine, in saying here were some things that I was struggling with regard to where my heart was, where I was in life, those different kinds of things. And I let him down. I've let down a lot of people. That's the bottom line. And I let them down, and in every instance I would ask their forgiveness. Forgiveness is not an immediate process. It is in fact a process that takes time, and I'll be in that process for quite some weeks and months, and I suspect years ahead. But I'm here because if you were to look at God's laws, they're in every instance designed to protect people from themselves. I think that is the bottom line of God's law. That it's not a moral, rigid list of do's and don'ts just for the heck of do's and don'ts. It is indeed to protect us from ourselves. And the biggest self of self is indeed self. That sin is in fact grounded in this notion of what is it that I want as opposed to somebody else. And in this regard, let me throw one more apology out there, and that is to people of faith across South Carolina, or for that matter across the nation. Because I think that one of the big disappointments when, believe it or not, I've been a person of faith all my life, if somebody falls within the fellowship of believers or the walk of faith, I think it makes that much harder for believers to say, well, where was that person come from? Or folks that weren't believers to say, where indeed was that person coming from? So one more apology in there. But I guess where I'm trying to go with this is that there are moral absolutes, and that God's law indeed is there to protect you from yourself. And there are consequences if you breach that. This press conference is a consequence. And so the bottom line is this. I've been unfaithful to my wife. I developed a relationship with what started as a dear, dear friend from Argentina. It began very innocently, as I suspect many of these things do, in just a casual email back and forth, in advice on one's life there and advice here. But here, recently, over this last year, it developed into something much more than that. And as a consequence, I hurt her. I hurt you all. I hurt my wife. I hurt my boys. I hurt friends like Tom Davis. I hurt a lot of different folks. And all I can say is that I apologize. I would ask for y'all's, I guess I'm not deserving of indulgence, but indulgence not for me, but for Jenny and the boys. They're a team of cameras and crews and all those sorts of things camped out down at Sullivan's Island. And I would just ask for a zone of privacy, if not for me, for her and the boys. As we go through this process of working through this, there are going to be some hard decisions to be made, to be dealt with. And those are probably not best dealt with through the prism of television cameras and media headlines. I'm committed to that process of walking through with Jenny, the boys, with the Tom Davises of the world, with the people of South Carolina, in saying, where do we go from here?